My last two videos were on the subject of reality tunnels. And I thought while it was fresh in my mind, I'd like to look at another aspect of our reality tunnels. And that is, does it say anything about meditation? Now, I don't myself think that meditation needs any theory to it, because basically the basic form of it is what Aleister Crowley called sit down, shut up and get out. In other words, for me, meditation is mostly about stilling the mind, getting into silence and, stilling the mind. But for some people, a bit of a theory does add something to it. So, for instance, if you're religious, you might say, I might do just the same meditation, but say, it's bringing me in touch with the divine. Or if you're a pagan, you might meditate in nature and say, this is how I find my roots in nature. Another person, perhaps a theosophist, might say, I'm exploring the etheric and the astral planes when I do it, and so on. Now, when I wrote Words Made Flesh, which is the book where I propose the radical idea that this universe we're in might actually be a virtual universe. In one of the later chapters, I suggested a meditation based on that. I said, go for a walk, being very aware of the space you're walking through, and look at it as if you're experiencing a virtual reality for the first time. So you look around and you admire it, wow, look at all those oak trees, the beautifully way they're rendered, the leaves are the same, but each one is completely different, there's no repetition. And look at the sense of perspective as you go down that avenue and that man is walking up it. It's all beautifully done, this. And the fine detail, I can get a magnifying glass and look at a flower. It's incredible. Now, the interesting thing about that exercise is that because you're so attentive and you're not got any judgment about what should be seen and what shouldn't, occasionally you see anomalous things. Out of the corner of an eye, you see a little goblin rustling through the leaves. And you do what is absolutely natural, what we've trained to do, which is you stare hard at it and look closely, and you find it's gone. There are a few leaves blowing, and that was probably what the movement was. Now, I said what's interesting about that is actually seeing a goblin is a bug in the software, because goblins are not supposed to exist in this world. So if you see one, it means you've detected a bug in the software. And what you do, instinctively, you stare and blink, and then you find a reason why it wasn't actually a goblin. So what you're doing is you're debugging the software of the universe. And I suggested maybe that's the purpose of consciousness. It is things scattered through your universe, which, if it notices any anomalies, it debugs them by explaining them away. Anyway, the idea of that was simply, I'm saying that this idea of a virtual reality universe, you could use it as a way of giving you a sort of another dimension to meditating, something else to look for. And that's what I thought I would do based on what I said about reality tunnels in my last two videos. I'm going to stick to the basic thing, sit down, shut up, get out. And the way I've suggested in my video about meditation is what I would normally do, which is increasing sensory awareness. And it's a thing that the New Agers now describe as mindfulness. So basically, you sit in a comfortable place and you become aware of the sitting. You can feel the ground under you or the chair and at your back and everything. Be fully aware of the actual sensations of sitting. And that includes the wind perhaps blowing over your skin. So, see if you can smell the air. Anything there? While you're still feeling all the sensations. And so gradually, you bring in the other senses. Is there a taste on your tongue? What are the sounds you're hearing? And then what about what is you're seeing? And the idea is to get to the stage where you're just fully receiving all these senses. You're not labeling them, you're not sort of choosing like that. And for instance, in sight, don't just look at what you're staring at, but try to be aware of the peripheral vision all around you. See if you can hold all that. And what you find is it's very difficult. If you if something really interesting smell comes, like the neighbours putting on a barbecue, you then tend to forget to look and to listen, to hear and that sort of thing, because you're fascinated by that. Your attention always wants to focus down onto something. Now this can become very frustrating for people doing this for the first time, because they find their mind keeps wandering. You smell the barbecue, and a few minutes later you're thinking, what am I going to cook for lunch? And you suddenly come round and you realize you've completely lost touch with your surroundings. You've just been thinking about cooking lunch. And yes, ideas like that come up. Now, I was taught by Gerald York that not to do the thing which beginners often do, which is think, oh, no, I must concentrate hard. I mustn't think about lunch. Go away, thoughts about lunch. He said, instead, if you're aware to all the senses that you're receiving, thinking about lunch is just another sense you're receiving. So rather than getting het up about it, just observe yourself thinking about lunch, and it tends to fade away amongst all the other feelings, and you're back in the now. Okay, so you could do that, and that could help a bit. But you can be left after a while thinking, why is it, what's wrong with me, that every time I just sit and quiet my mind, all these thoughts bubble up? And there's a worse stage than that. When I was doing Abramelin, so I was spending a lot of time meditating, I managed to quieten my mind quite a bit, so that for long periods my mind wasn't wandering. What happened then is really brilliant ideas came up. Like now it would be an idea for a brilliant new video I could put on YouTube. There's a tremendous temptation to think, wow, I must capture this. I must write it down. I don't want to lose this brilliant idea. But again, what I learned to do was to say, be grateful. Thank you for that interesting idea, but it's come at the wrong time. So please, when I finish meditating, remind me of it, and then I'll give it proper attention. And that worked quite well. But what I wanted to do this video is to look at these things from the point of view of the idea of a reality tunnel. Now, I compared a reality tunnel to the desktop that a computer gives you. In other words, what's actually going on the computer is just a massive symbols language. It's constant flow of information and moving around and meanings and things like that. It's like a soup of information. But what it gives you is a clear, simple desktop. And I argued that this was real because it satisfied the tests of reality. Solid objects, you could move around, act on them, you could put them inside other ones, and they didn't vanish, they didn't change. This was real. And I suggested that this is what the brain is giving us. When we think we're experiencing this world, we're looking at it and we're hearing the sounds, that sort of thing, it's actually all modeled by the brain. It's given us a reality tunnel through whatever it's through. And it's like the desktop. This is what we're given. And I explained that though it might seem a bit limited, not having magical things happening, it's essential for our survival. And I'm talking about something which has evolved over billions of years because the very simplest creatures all behave as if they were in a material reality. It's what the brain gives us for our protection, and I gave reasons why it protected us. So here is the brain working hard to give you this desktop, this sensory experience. And you're making it work much harder because you are trying to take the whole thing in. Now, so what the brain normally does is actually focuses down. It saves bandwidth by focusing down. You go into a fantastically beautiful garden. You look, gaze in wonder at the whole bed of brilliantly coloured pansies. And then you look and there's a beautifully shaped lily. Now, while you're looking at the lily and focusing on it, you think the pansies are still there. But actually, if you look at the lily and then try to describe the pansies, you realize that you aren't really seeing the pansies. It's just your mind was just sort of holding them for you. Because it's only really, you have very high bandwidth only in a very small area. And all the rest is an illusion, because you can look there and see it clearly, you can look there and see it clearly, and now you look here and are seeing it clearly, and your mind is sort of, as it were, putting in a cache all the rest of it. So you think it's all just as clear all around you until you actually look to try to see it. So all the time the brain is actually trying to save energy. And that, I suggest, is one of the reasons why it's so difficult to be fully sensory aware. Because you smell the barbecue smoke and you're thinking about it, and suddenly your focus, this great expanse all around you, this three-dimensional sense around smellorama experience, suddenly focuses down on that barbecue. It must be the neighbour, which uses far less processing power, far less bandwidth. And that also is why I think your mind wanders. You see, thinking about what you're going to cook for lunch, that seems like a big thing, doesn't it? You've got to plan it and everything, and you've got to chop up the onions and everything. Now, even if you actually sort of, in your mind, are picturing chopping up the onions, that whole experience is such low definition that it's a huge saving of energy compared with trying to experience the full experience of where you are. So basically, the brain is doing something rather like when you're on a Zoom call and you're seeing the person, you welcome them, hey, you've grown, or I see you've grown a beard now, or something like that. Great to see people and get this conversation going. But very often you find that the sound isn't very good, or they're flickering or everything unstable. So what you say is, let's turn off the video because we really want to talk. So you turn off the video and then you talk. What you've done is you've shrunk the necessary bandwidth down to the essential, which is talking. And so that really is what the brain is doing, I think, when you're trying to have this great meditation experience and you keep finding you're sort of focusing down on something. It's like it's closing down the bandwidth. And even if you've got a brilliant idea, say you've a sudden solution to a mathematical problem or something, you might think that's a big thing, a lot of hard work there, but actually it's just really a linear sequence. It's nothing compared to the sensory experience of a total visual and sound and smell and taste and feeling world around you. So that's interesting because it sort of suggests this could be a reason why these things happen. Now, if you persist, and when I was doing the abdominal limb operation, I was meditating for up to 4.5 hours a day, 3 lots of an hour and a half, a really long time. And I was also fasting. And fasting reduces the body's capacity, energy capacity, when you fast for a lot. Now, they always say that the brain is very important for us, well, for humans and for everything. The brain is very important. And a lot of the energy we use goes to the brain. I've said a figure something like 40% of the energy the body uses is actually maintaining the brain. And that is why if, say, you're exposed in freezing cold, your fingers first go numb, and then your toes, and then your arms. It's like the body is drawing in, saving energy by not warming up your extremities, because it's got to keep the brain, it's got to protect the brain. Now, as I was saying, that when you're meditating a lot and you're fasting and leading a very sort of ascetic life, the brain is having to work very hard at this meditation. And what happens, and this happened quite often for me while I was doing the Abraham, is that you enter into a state of bliss. Now, what it felt like is there I was sitting, focused on my body and everything around me, and very often it becomes quite uncomfortable. You know, you have an itch there, you want to scratch, you want to blink. The kneeling position I did was painful. But then you sort of float up, like it's floating up out of your body. It's as though your soul has sort of dematerialized and gone up to there, and you're almost looking down on your body. Now, again, the explanations for that, at the time I was reading The Secret of the Golden Flower, Jung's translation of that, and Wilhelm, and these pictures they had of the sage sitting in meditation, and then a little sort of sage coming out of his head and everything. I thought, that's what's happening. Or else I looked at it from an alchemical point of view. Yes, I've distilled my essence and it's risen up to an upper chamber sort of thing. But what I'm saying is that in terms of what we're talking about, bliss is a huge saving of energy. Instead of all this sensory experience and all these feelings and things like that, there you are focused in silence up there. I drew this analogy with the desktop on the computer. Okay, if I look at my computer desktop and I stare at it, now even there I can't take in the whole thing. You know, I'm looking at that file, or I'm looking at that file, I'm looking up there. But if I just hold still and sit and just gaze and try to be fully sensory aware of the desktop, after a while it melts away. And instead on my one, there's a colourful stream of light flowing and wrapping and moving all around. It's the screensaver, which comes on to save the battery if it's a laptop, saving power. And I'm suggesting that that state of bliss you experience is actually the brain's screensaver, or should I say reality saver. It takes you to that place which needs far less energy. And so the body can preserve its energy for your safety, and is doing something to protect you. Now, some people, and I've hardly ever experienced this, but some people go a stage further. They hold that state. See, that state of bliss is very comfortable. There you are wondering, oh God, when's this meditation going to end? And then you're up there and you don't mind when it ends. You could be there forever. It's that sort of feeling. But people who stay there for a very long time sometimes go to a stage beyond, which is a true mystical experience, where they might feel oneness with God or one with the universe, or they might have visions of beautiful things like that. The sort of stuff, the psychedelic stuff that you might get from taking a psychedelic drug. Now, if I extend what I'm saying, that bliss is your screensaver, then what might be happening is you're getting a glimpse of what lies behind the desktop. The constant flow of information and stuff which is out of which the desktop tunnels you a reality. You're seeing a glimpse of eternity, of meaning, all these things which the brain tries to separate out for you. And so I offer that meditation doesn't need a theory or anything behind it, but sometimes looking at it from a fresh viewpoint, from a fresh theory, gives you interesting ideas. And I'm saying the idea that our brain is giving us a reality tunnel, first of all, reminds us that what it's giving us is not a constricting, boring thing. It's actually something very important for our survival. Secondly, it's working hard to do that. And when you meditate, you're really challenging it and encouraging it to go into screensaver mode to save you. And maybe if you go keep at it, you'll even go into the software of the universe.